Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we've got Ely Lucas. How you doing?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm super happy to have you on the show. So, for folks who are meeting you for the first time, do you want to give us a little bit of a background on who you are, what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi, I'm Eli. I work at Cypress as developer experience engineer. I've been there for a little bit over a year. Been doing web development for, I don't know, 23, 24-ish years. Kind of got started off when, my very first code editor was Netscape Navigator Gold Edition, and started working on building websites and got into front page. And then once I realized WYSIWYGs weren't the way to go. Like started doing HTML, CSS, learning coding, and all that fun stuff. So yeah, been doing that. Kind of grew up through that, and some of my past experience has been at Ionic, and
hmm
so I was working on Ionic over there as well, and yeah, kind of various other startups and whatnot throughout the years. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Um, I think that I my first text editor was I think just Notepad. I think I
Yeah,
remember
right.
writing like table-based HTML layouts in just Notepad, no syntax highlighting. It would go chaos all the time because you'd always miss something. You're missing a closing bracket or whatever, and then it doesn't work, and you just have to go like character by character to try hope you notice the problem you had. Whew, those were the days, huh?
Yeah, my very first like actual code editor was like Homesite. Remember Homesite?
I
It was a
don't remember home site.
it was a Macromedia product,
Oh
like
wow.
back in the day. Actually, I think Macromedia
Yeah.
like acquired them and like brought it in. But yeah, it was like a basically a text editor, but it supported like HTML and stuff out of the box. It was pretty awesome stuff. Man, that's bringing me back into the day though.
It really is. Like I'm kind of flashing back to my big chunky like box monitor and the tower and the under the desk and in my parents' basement like hacking on my MySpace page. But we've come a long way since then, and one of the things that I think has been really interesting, kind of as we watch tools evolve over time, is we went from this world where if you want to check if your code is good, you just kind of like take a copy of the last version of the code, put it into a folder, and then you publish your change. And if something breaks, you would just like drag the old folder onto FTP. No testing strategy, no assurances whatsoever. It was just like let it rip, upload it to the FTP, and
Or,
hope for the
or,
best.
or if you're like me, you would like RDP directly into the server and make the change to the files right there to see if it would work.
Oh my goodness, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think yeah, the real YOLO coding. But now we have the world of front end has really matured, so we have you know much more mature frameworks, much more mature IDEs, and we've started to see tooling get built around how to automatically make sure that our code is high quality. And that ranges from linting tools. We've got things like Prettier to make sure that our formatting is good. We've got, type checkers like TypeScript. And then we've got this whole suite of like testing and automated testing that is really fascinating. And that kind of brings us to where you are today at Cypress. So how does Cypress fit into the modern web dev stack?
Okay. Yeah. So as web has kind of like grown up over the past decade or two, like we used to have just web pages, and they were kind of like everything inside of a web page, all the buttons and HTML and CSS and stuff like that. It's just kind of like this one big hodgepodge of HTML. And then we started to get frameworks that really encouraged us to componentize those items to make them reusable,
Mm,
and whatnot. And so frameworks like Angular and React and Vue and Svelte, they really encourage like you write these small reusable components. And before, like we joked around about making like these ad hoc changes, but as businesses have become more and more reliant on their web presences, like actually making mistakes in production could be fairly costly.
extremely,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and so we got these tools to help us test to make sure that when we make changes, that we're not bringing in like bugs and whatnot into our production environments. And so one of those tools is Cypress, and Cypress, um, hopefully, what Cypress is. If not, we need to be doing a better job out there. But I think at this time we're pretty ubiquitous in the web ecosystem. But Cypress, are what we're really known for is doing end-to-end testing. And so that is where you like visit a URL, and then through code you drive user interactions, and then you do some things, and then you write some assertions to make sure that the web app is in the state that you expect it to be in.
Yeah. And so from the perspective of like me as a web developer, what I need to be sure of is that the change that I just made doesn't cause production to go down, because like you said, it's getting much more costly, and it's also way harder to fix. When we're talking about web dev in the 90s, where you're just uploading an HTML file to an FTP server, the path to fix it is you fix that HTML server. But over time, as the web got more complex, now we've got varnish cache, we've got PHP running in the background, we've got a Redis cache running, we've got a database somewhere. And when you make that mistake, it's not just, upload the old version of the HTML. You got to unwind your cache. You got to make sure that the Redis cache and the varnish cache aren't resetting each other in a way that causes an infinite loop of broken stuff. And you've also got, like so many dependencies and complexities that unrolling isn't just, you don't just get to say like, okay, roll back. And like, that's true. You can use tooling to make some of that one-click rollback work. Like, I know PlanetScale's got a one-click rollback, and Netlify's got a one-click rollback. So you can build to make that possible, but it's still, you'd just be better if the thing didn't fail in the first place. And so,
Yeah, and
go ahead.
And those are just the things that are happening in production. Usually on development
Right.
teams, we have processes that we have to go through. Like we have to make a PR into the repo, and that PR needs to get approvals, which means other people have to be around to like view it and approve it and get it in. And then like the CI/CD systems kick off, and all these tools were built to like really like help us, but they also added a certain amount of overhead into making a deployment like this. And so that's why they say if you can catch a bug like in development, it's much cheaper to fix while it's in development versus once it gets out to production.
And you bring up that actually is such a critical thing to sort of internalize, right? Because it's not just that we have the tooling, right? Like you can think, I have an automated test. I've done my job. I've done all I can do. But there's also where the automated test happens. And I think the most expensive thing that I've ever been part of as a development team is all the tests running only on the production deploy, where you're in a local development environment where all these things aren't actually running. And then you go to the development environment, the staging environment, and only like a few of the tests are running. And then there's this really restrictive set of tests on production because it takes 45 minutes for those tests to run. Right. And so then you come back and you get an error. And so you've just, everything was working. 45 minutes later, you'd get told that actually you can't ship this to production because this thing broke. And then you have to go dig through some logs, and then you do the whole song and dance again. Or you have to wait, 45 minutes to run the tests on your local box. Right. And so what you just said about solving or catching bugs in development is such a critical thing. Because we with tools like Cypress and with good like modern IDEs and the way that things can be integrated, you can be running these tests as you go. It's like when I'm in a file and I do something that like TypeScript doesn't agree with, I just see something get underlined in red and I hover over it. It tells me what I did wrong. I fix it, and now I don't have to wait for TypeScript to fail on the production build. And so Cypress is giving us that, right? Like I'm making some assumptions here. So Cypress is giving us the ability, the same way that TypeScript catches our type issues in our code, Cypress can let us know during development whether or not we broke our UI.
Yeah, and that's one of the things where component testing in Cypress really comes into play. So if you think about the old school testing pyramid, right, where you have the end-to-end test at the top and the unit test at the bottom,
Right.
typically you would think like you have lots of unit tests, because they're easy to write, they're fast to execute, and they need to be reliable. Like something in the environment shouldn't cause like a unit test to like start to fail or anything like that.
Right.
And then you have end-to-end testing where you write fewer of them. They're typically slower to execute, and they typically can have a little bit more what you would call flakiness. Something happened, like a server wasn't responding back in a certain amount of
Mm.
time, or something just happened or whatnot. And so, as a developer, if you're using end-to-end testing currently in your stack, whether if you're writing your end-to-end tests or if you have a QA team that's writing your end-to-end tests, like running the full end-to-end suite is not normally something that you do as a developer while you're sitting there coding away on your website. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that kind of happens like afterwards. But with component testing, we're actually bringing some of the power that you get in end-to-end testing further down the stack, to make it more like unit testing and integration testing. And so component tests share a lot of the same factors that a unit test does. They're quick, they're easy to write, they're easier to set up.
Mm.
You can actually run them while you're coding, and do like, if you do like test driven development or something like that. I like to use it as a developer tool that will help me as I'm working on a particular component to have the test up and running, to be my test, basically my workbench, my test bed, as
Mm.
I'm kind of like working on this particular feature to make sure that it's working properly.
And so, to like, the way that you would describe that then is you are in the same way that we hot reload our development UI. You've
Hmm.
got Cypress running alongside, and whenever you save your code, it just reruns that test and lets you know if it's passing or failing.
Yep,
That's
exactly.
that's pretty powerful stuff, because it again, it just kind of like brings the experience to an instantaneous feedback loop. I see a problem, I fix the problem. I don't have to break my context or remember what I was working on when that thing broke, or put down this thing to go back to this file and correct that issue. And that those are, like, I don't know, from my perspective, one of the most costly things that happens on development teams is that, like, the feedback loop is too long, and so the developers
Hmm.
move on to another task, and then they get
Hmm.
interrupted by a failure, and then they have to stop one task, move back to the old task, try the fix. And the flakier something is, the harder it is to work with, the longer the feedback loop, the more likely it is that developers either end around that process entirely, and that's where you get the "it works on my machine" thing, or they just are, they're completely hamstrung by their inability to iterate quickly because there's so much context switching. And that's,
Hmm.
I mean, I bet if you had somebody go do an economic analysis of like how much it costs businesses to have slow developer feedback loops, it's got to be right up there with like just spinning up the most powerful AWS machine and letting it run forever.
Right.
Like, it's so expensive to have that many people in this industry where, it's incredibly expensive to hire engineers,
Hmm.
and to waste their time by having them go this far and then get yanked back to another context and back to the other context. God, that's expensive.
Yep. Yeah. Like I said, it's all about tightening up that feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
And with Cypress component testing, like, so component testing isn't anything new, really. We've been doing component testing for probably the past 4 or 5 years, especially in the React ecosystem. You might be familiar with tools like a React testing library,
Mm.
that you would run a Jest that encourages you, to mount up a component and write test tickets and whatnot. How Cypress component testing differs from that is that we are actually rendering the component in the same test environment that an end-to-end test will run in. And so
I
your
got you.
component is being rendered into a real browser versus some of the other tools are rendering into like JS DOM, and all it's really doing is like outputting the HTML. It's not
Right.
actually inside of a real web browser being interacted with it as an actual user would.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of one of the advantages that we have. So we'll open it up
So
in the real web browser.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick, because I feel like
Mhm.
you actually just touched on something that, for somebody who's new, and I see we've got a couple folks in the chat who are new to web dev.
Mhm.
So you just said that Cypress is opening it up in an actual browser, whereas other tools are opening it up in JS DOM.
Mhm.
And that is, I think, the critical difference that I've noticed is that when you're testing, right, you want to test as if you had a QA engineer whose entire job was to run through a playbook and open this page, click this thing, add an email. When you hit submit, does it go to the right thing, right? And like I worked at IBM, I've written these QA playbooks where you're doing the checklist, but humans are human. They cut corners, they forget something, they miss a step. And so you'd always kind of run these issues where somebody would fail to do something by following the list wrong, or they would say something was fine because they actually didn't do it. And then you would find out later that it was broken. So Cypress is a robot that has that human-like application of, I am in a browser, I am actually clicking, I am actually typing and doing keystrokes, so that it's a real experience of using your website versus a simulated experience that's run in JS DOM, which is great. Like I love JS DOM, but JS DOM is not a browser. It is a kind of a simulation of the browser, which is, it's the same reason that I really like when I'm working on like a PR. I want to deploy preview that's in the same environment as my production environment, just to kind of look at them side by side. I don't go straight from my local host to production. I want to see it running in the environment first. So anyways, that's a little bit of a tangent, but I feel like it's an important thing, especially for somebody who's hearing about Cypress for the first time.
Yeah. And so with Cypress, you said it's kind of like a robot. You're taking that playbook that people would usually run through manually, and you're codifying it. You're making it be repeatable by an automated process, not necessarily a human. So you're taking all those action steps: visiting the webpage, clicking the button, sending the email. Those are all things that you do through code now versus manually, like stepping through and doing it.
Yeah, I think that's great. Okay, and so what we're doing with an end-to-end test is we're booting the whole website and we're running through like critical user flows, and that's you got to do it. It's so important. If your website makes money, you need to make sure that the critical happy paths are working at all times. That's definitely not something that you want to have to wait for every time you save your file. So what you're telling me is that component testing is, if I can drastically oversimplify this, it is a tiny end-to-end test for one piece of your UI.
The biggest difference is that in the end-to-end test, you're visiting a web page,
right?
Like an actual URL, whether that's running locally on your server or on a staging environment somewhere or whatnot. You're hitting a URL, just like a user would. An end-to-end or a component test is mounting a component and only rendering that component, to not everything else that needs to go along with a particular web page.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. So let's talk about what we're going to do today. So maybe just walk us through the high level, what our little project is that we're going to build together.
Okay. Yeah. So we're going to do a little bit of role playing. Jason and myself are developers on a team, and we just got some mocks from our design team, and we're going to work on building a new login form for our website. We decided we're going to create a new product, and the very first thing that you do on a new product is create the login screen, right? And so we got that. They gave us some HTML and some CSS that we're going to use, and we're going to take that. We're going to drop it into an app, and we're going to start writing some component tests along with it. And so it's kind of important to point out. So we mentioned these frameworks that you can use to build components. And so Cypress right now has support for React, Angular, Vue, and Svelte to do component testing with. And so today we're going to do a React project and work with that.
Gotcha. Yep. Do a little React. Okay. So I'm going to switch us over into pair programming mode here with this button that I couldn't find. There it is. All right. So here we go. We are talking today to Ely. So make sure you go over and give a follow on the old Twitter. And this episode, like every episode, is being live captioned. We've got Diane here from White Coat Captioning taking all that down for us. That is available on the homepage of the site, learnwithjason.dev. You can follow along there. And that is made possible through the support of our sponsors, Netlify, NX, New Relic, and soon to be Pluralsight. So thank you very much to them for making this possible. And we are talking today about, if I can get over to this window, Cypress. So Cypress itself is a very cool free tool. You can just run in and start building stuff with it today. And that is the extent of the knowledge that I have. So you said you wanted to start by bootstrapping a project. So I created a folder, this Cypress component testing React. Okay. I'm going to use Vite. Is that does that work?
Yep, that sounds great.
All right, so I'm going to use Vite because I love Vite. And
so along with all the UI libraries that we support, there's various kind of these meta frameworks or bundlers that we support as well. And so in React, we support Create React App, we support Next.js, and we support Vite. Vue, we support Vue CLI and Vue V and Next. Angular is Angular, and Svelte right now is just Svelte with V, and I think whatever Svelte's default one is. I'm not as familiar with that ecosystem right now. I'm starting to get into it.
Okay, so now we have, there we go. We got a basic site. So I'm going to stop this server. I'm going to open this up and, wait, hold on a second. Let me close this. I'm going to get init because otherwise it ignores all my folders. We'll try that again. There we go. And so we're looking at a pretty, the standard app. So we've got an app. The app itself has all of this stuff, which I'm going to delete, right?
Yeah, this is stuff. We're mainly going to be working on our component, which will probably drop in someplace into our application. Okay. If we want to see it running through like the Vite dev server, we could definitely drop it here into the app.
Okay, so I'm just gonna clean some stuff out. We will work on this as if it were a like the homepage is the login, right? So we'll make that happen. And then I'm going to just kind of delete some stuff here, get us all the way down to a nice, clean dev site. And I believe the way that this will work, there it is. Okay, this is exactly what I want. It's kind of a vertically centered deal. So as we build our component, it'll just sit in the center of the page, which is what I want. So
let's take actually for the first step, let's take a look at the mock that our design team sent over to us and kind of think about like how we want to break it apart.
Okay, I'm downloading that mock. Here it is. Okay.
Okay. So we got a pretty basic login form here. It has a couple of input fields, or it has a button, some validation that's going to go along with the title. Just like quickly looking at this, like I think we can probably like create a button component because every website needs a good button component. Probably create like an input field component that can be reusable for our form, and then maybe just like the main login form component as well.
Okay, so you said a button, you said an input, right? Input?
Yep, an input.
And what was the last one?
And then a login form. So components.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, components contain other components. So.
All right, so we can start by just doing export. I don't want to use default exports. We're gonna do export const. Let's do one of these. We're gonna do the button, and that's going to return a button. Okay, so that's piece one.
Button.
Input. It's going to be export function input, and that's going to return input type text. And
there's I think they sent over the HTML for us to use too. So there might be some things inside that HTML that we can just copy out of there.
Okay, great. Let's just drag this over and look at it. Oh, good. Okay, so we've got here's our button. So I'll just take that and put it in here. Oops. Why won't you? Oh. Reactify that a little bit. So there's our button. And then we've got our inputs, which, let's see. These are a label. Here's the label. Then there's an input. They've got a type class, ARIA invalid, error message, and then
Let's start with the button and like work on it.
Okay, great.
Let's get the button up and running. Okay, so here we got the button. Let's get Cypress installed in the app and component testing set up.
Okay, so I'm going to npm install dev.
Yep.
And is it just Cypress or is it
just Cypress? Yep.
Okay. Do I need anything else?
Nope, that should work.
Okay. And so Cypress is an npm dependency and also an app, right?
Right.
And so that makes it a little bit bigger.
Yeah, architecturally, like what's happening is when you start up Cypress for the very first time, if you haven't already done it, it's going to download our binary, and our binary is an Electron application. That's kind of the launch pad to get inside of Cypress.
Gotcha.
So to launch it, you got the latest version of Cypress there. If you want to create a script, you can just say tester, whatever you want to do. And the command would be Cypress open.
Okay. So then if we run npm run test, first time using Cypress 10.11.
This is where it's downloading it. Yep, there you go. Okay, and so this brings you, so one of our key goals of Cypress is to like just make the developer experience getting up and running with it like as seamless as possible.
Yeah.
And when you hop into Cypress now, like I said, we were historically an end testing tool, but now like when you start it up, you get your choose your own adventure type path. And so we're going to go into component testing. You're going to see the beta flag there. So when we launch Vue 10, like we launch component testing into beta here in the next few weeks, we're going to launch component testing GA. So, definitely look forward to that.
Nice.
But there's just going to be a few minor changes to go along with it. But if you're looking at getting started with it, don't let the beta flag like scare you away.
This is slick. See here, I can see it picked up. Yeah. One of the things that is so underrated is just auto detection. We've put all the information in our projects. Save me one click. I'm so happy.
Yeah. And we go through like extreme measures to try to like make this as seamless as possible for you. So you saw we automatically detected your UI library, your bundler that you're using. We got the bundlers that we support are Vite and Webpack right now. This is doing a dependency check. Since it's a brand new project, you're going to have them all. But if like you were missing one, it's going to let you know which one you're missing and give you the command to how to install it.
Got it.
This screen right here is letting you know all the files that we're going to scaffold for you.
Oh, you're going to do it for me?
Yeah.
Slick.
Yes. So this first one right here is probably the one of the most important ones. It's the configuration file. We also detected that this project is TypeScript, and so we're creating a TypeScript configuration file and TypeScript on all the other files. And you can see that up there in the configuration, we're setting your framework to React and your bundler to Vite. And why this is important is because when you're actually running component tests through Cypress, we're using your development server to run everything through. We're not firing up our own custom development server or anything like that. And so your components are going to pretty much be running through the same server that you would use if you're developing your website.
Got it. And again, that's why like it's really important that that's the case, because the worst feeling in the world is when you realize that the feature isn't broken, your environments are incompatible. And now instead of building a feature, you're debugging your dev environment versus your staging environment versus your production environment. And that is like, it just drains my will to live. Like when I realize that like my boilerplate, not the app, but the stuff that runs the app is the thing that's broken. It just like melt into my chair and I'm like, oh, good. Another one of these days, right? It's the absolute worst. So using the same environment for everything is such a big deal.
Absolutely. The next one is a component file. This is a file that runs before each and every test that you're going to run. And so this would be the entry point into any type of things that you want to include into your app.
Mm,
Well, I'll get to that in a little bit, but kind of think of this component file as like your main app file for your application.
okay.
And then you got the commands file. And so you can extend Cypress's API by creating your own custom commands, which is really helpful to do like common steps going through an application or whatnot. But
Gotcha.
that is where that happens. And this component index.html is the main index file that we mount your component into. You can kind of think of it if you have like a public / index file that your dev server is going to throw up.
Gotcha.
This is that, but for your component tests. And then the last file is a fixture, and just an example of how to write a fixture. And with Cypress, you can mock API requests,
Mm,
and you can and these fixtures are like the responses to these API requests if you want to put them in a JSON file versus like having to put it in your actual code.
gotcha. Totally makes sense. And I just saw Jen Junod just rated. Hello, Jen. Thank you for coming over. All right, so I'm going to continue here. And so what we've just done thus far is we've set up, here's my Cypress config, and it looks like the other pieces are...
You got a new Cypress folder there at the very top.
Oh, here it is. Got it. Up at the top. And now I just have to choose which browser. So I'm using Edge, so I'm just going to hit Edge. Is that cool?
Yep, sounds good. So we also have support for Edge and Chrome, all the Chromium browsers, and recently we got support for WebKit
Nice.
as well. That's an experimental feature. You have to like install some additional dependencies with it, but we're working on getting that all ironed out.
Got it.
Okay, and now you're in the test runner. You can see that you don't have any specs in your app right now, so it's showing this create new empty spec. We're not going to do this right now because this experience honestly isn't that great for React apps.
Gotcha.
In the future, what's going to happen is and this is what happens for Vue right now, but you'll be able to hit this, and then you'll be able to see a list of your components in your app, and then select the component, and then it's going to scaffold out a test that mounts that component for you.
Gotcha.
But right now, like we don't have that for React, and it's not going to put the test where you want it, whatnot. So we're just going to manually create a test for it.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'm coming in, and how do you do this? Do you put your specs next to your components, or do you put them into like a spec folder?
So typically we say like collocate your tests with your code.
Okay.
And by that we could also mean like, hey, if you want to put it in a specs folder, that's also okay.
And this is the pattern, is that right?
No, the pattern is actually .cy, cy.
Oh, .cy.
File extension. And there's a reason why we did that, and that's because we know for a lot of existing projects, you're probably going to have like a ton of other types of tests that are currently use .spec and .test and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
So we wanted our own extension that we could be able to find our tests for.
So that you don't have to do a bunch of config to figure out which ones are the right ones to look at and so on and so forth. Gotcha.
Right. Okay. So now we're in here, and we're probably ready to start writing our very first test. And so our testing code is based off of Mocha. And, if you ever use Mocha, or if you ever use Jasmine or something like that, you're kind of used to like organize your tests into describe contexts and then individual tests using like the it or test methods and whatnot. And so
let's see if I remember how to do this. So we go describe, and then do you pass in, is it like, what do you actually pass in? I forget how this works.
So it's going to take two parameters. The first one is going to be a string that's a description of what the spec file does. And so here we're going to be doing the button. There you go.
Okay.
And then the second parameter is going to be a function.
A function.
That gets executed for this. There you go. So you can see right now, like hover over describe, you're getting some red squigglies there. What's it complaining about?
Cannot find describe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so for some reason, Vite is having trouble finding the TypeScript global typings for these. And so let's go into your tsconfig file and just add, not the node one, but the main one.
Main one is where?
Right above it.
Oh, here. Geez.
There we go. Okay, so in that include, add the Cypress folder to that as well. I think that should fix
Okay.
that issue.
And back we go. And it's
And
happy.
there we go. Okay, yeah. So now you're going to get IntelliSense and everything, like when you're writing your tests, which is always awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And so the next thing is, so when I'm starting off, one of the very first things I like to do is just mount the component and make sure it mounts properly.
Okay.
And so let's write a test. So this is going to be the it method, or test works as well. They're aliases to each other. And then you just say like it mounts. And then this takes in a function.
Okay.
And now the command, earlier I described the major difference between end-to-end testing and component testing is end-to-end testing, you visit a web page. Component testing, you mount a component.
Okay.
End-to-end testing, you'd use sci.visit and give it a URL. But in component testing, you're going to use sci.mount. And then you're going to pass in a JSX string for our button component.
JSX. So we'll use the button, which is in there.
All right. And imported it for us. And yeah, let's give that a view and see what it's doing.
Okay, so here's Cypress, and
then
running.
You can hit the focus there, and that will bring your browser back up.
Okay, great. So it looks like it's doing the thing. Do I just click into it?
Yep. There you go. All right. And so now we got a button, and it's rendered over here on this right hand side. We call this the area under test, or the AUT. And this is a real browser, so you can actually play around. You can click your components, play around with them. You can use the developer tooling to inspect it, play around with the CSS, debug, all that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, so we can, let's see, whoops. Wanted to close the welcome. But yeah, so it's all here. Very cool. Very, very cool. All right. So that feels like the hello world of testing, is you just mount the component and it's there and great, you've done it. Testing is set up. And it's a meaningful test in that I have absolutely forgotten to return my component return the actual markup from my components before. And then I'm like, why isn't anything on the screen? And so that part is definitely helpful. So what should we do next? Like what is worth testing in a button?
Well, so the first thing is let's use this as a development tool right now. We're taking a look at our button, and we can see that it doesn't look like it should look like from our mocks. So it's missing the CSS. And that's kind of one of the nice things is if you're using component testing as you're developing, you can also just build out the component, build out the CSS, build out the JavaScript incrementally, like while you're working with it. And so we've got some CSS here that we can use. And I think if you scroll down a little bit, you got you scrolled right past it. It should be up front. I think they put each area. So you got the button right there.
All right, so I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this bit and throw it into our app.css.
That sounds good.
And let's just find out how well that functions.
Yeah, and so here we got some CSS variables set up and whatnot, a custom font that we're using. These are all things that like the site overall depends on, and then we have the CSS for our button. Okay. And using React, we have up to 10 billion ways to do CSS, right?
Yeah, so I tend to love these because then I can just come in over here and I can say we're going to import styles from button.module.css, and then my class name is going to be styles.button. And perfect. Theoretically speaking, this just worked. Did not. Okay. And it did not work because, so I've got my app.css. How am I actually including this? Let's take a look.
Okay. You're on the right track. Remember that one file that I said kind of like mimics our app file in our application, and if we're like
Oh, you're
importing
right.
anything,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
Okay.
we need to set that up. So we're not actually mounting your app component; we're mounting the button component. So it's not getting any of that global CSS right now. And so there's a couple ways you can do this. You can add. We won't do it this way, but if you had like external just CSS you wanted to include, you could add
Mm-hmm.
it here into the index file.
Mm-hmm.
But the component.ts file, you can import the CSS in that, and that will get it into your so the file directly below this one.
File directly below this one here.
Yeah.
And we will import. Let's see, it's going to go up to, whoops, to source to, is it just app.css?
Yeah, I think that's it.
That'll do it. Hey,
Boom, there we go.
there we go. Now we got a
And
button.
right. And I think the last thing that we're missing on getting our component looking correctly is we're using a custom font. And the font's not that different, but our designers are different going to notice because they have laser eyes for those types of things. And so our font, if I recall correctly, is a Google font.
Okay.
And I think it's a part of those assets that were sent over.
Montserrat. Okay, so let's look over here. Here's the font.
Yep. So we can add this to that component index file.
Got it. Okay, so I need to add that into
up in the Cypress folder.
The Cypress folder here.
Yep. So this is the index file that we mount your component into. You see on line 16 that data-sci.root.
We're
throwing your component directly into there.
Okay, and then I'm going to need to also make sure that it shows up in my app itself. Okay.
Very good. Okay.
And then are we done in this component index?
For now.
Okay, I'll close it for now. Don't need the font anymore because we got it in. Should be good on global CSS. And then we're looking at, here's our app. We've got our button CSS. We've got our button markup. And over here, we have a font.
A font, yep. And with the designer eyes, I think they're going to catch that. It's the new font now. But if you wanted to, you could inspect it, go to the computer, and see that it's actually rendering the font that it's supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
But cool. So now we have our component is looking correctly. Let's make it sure that it's going to behave correctly.
Great.
So a few of the things I can think of when you have a button is you want to make sure that it's going to support like whatever text that you put into it.
Okay.
And so we can write a test. Let's write this in like a TDD type fashion. So we'll write the test.
Yeah, good call. Okay, yeah, let me go to the test.
Okay.
And then we want like it accepts custom text. Let's see if I can. So we would want to do like sci.mount button, and then we would do like text is custom, and then I need to capture this.
No,
right?
Actually you don't.
Oh, I don't. Okay.
Nope. So we'll get that. And then so now you're mounting it. Now we can write an assertion to make sure that the text actually contains the custom text. And so with that, there's a few different ways that you can write assertions, but the one that we'll probably do here is to use the sci.get method. And then this is going to take a selector, and these selectors are a lot like jQuery selectors. And so you can select by elements, you can select by class names, by IDs, attributes. It's pretty powerful. Gives you a lot of different ways to do things.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would probably do right now, and this is not something I would suggest for end-to-end testing, but for component testing, we're pretty confident our button component is only going to have one button. And so we can just select button. Yep, just like that.
Okay.
And then we can chain off of this method with a .should.
Okay.
And then we can say should, this is a method. And inside of the should, you can put in have, I think it's have text.
Like here, have text.
Yep.
Okay.
And then give it, and then the second parameter to should would be the text that we expect it to have.
Oh, nice. Okay. You can see that I write a lot of tests in my day to day. Okay, so collapse that down so we can see what's going on. So we've got a component over here, and we're trying to pass in some custom text and then verifying that that works. The IDE is already telling us that we screwed this up, but Cypress will also tell us that we screwed this up, and it is now failing.
Yep. Go ahead and hit the little refresh button on the right. There you go. And we'll just watch this run. And so you can see it spinning and whatnot. It's trying to find that text. This is something that we have in Cypress. It's automatic awaiting because that's one of the things, like when you're writing like tests against the browsers, like sometimes things don't happen fast enough. Most of our assertions will wait up to 4 seconds by default for the thing to become true before it will try to fail the test. And so you can see it took a little while. It's waiting there, but eventually it will time out.
And I like double click that button, so I also might have.
Oh, so it stopped it during it. Okay, yeah. So we'll tries for 4 seconds.
There it goes.
Okay, so it says it can't find the text, and so now red, green, refactor. We see the test, or red, refactor, green, whatever the saying is. We see it failing, so now we can go into the component and actually make this work.
So we want some text, and that's going to be a string. And nope, that's not how that works. I forget. I'm very bad at TypeScript. Right? Is that right? There it is. Okay, and then we can put in our text. Okay, so then if I come back out here, I'm going to focus, and there we go.
Cool. So we got our first real passing test. The second thing that we're probably going to want to do is to make sure that when we click on the button, that it actually raises a click event that we can tie into through a prop. And so this test could be like, hey, when we click it, on chain should be called.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to sci.mount, and we'll say button. And then I'm going to do the same thing to sci.get button, and then click.
Yep.
All right.
And then, so what we're going to want to do here, so your button component is going to take an onChange prop. But we need some way to verify that when the button is clicked, that onChange prop is called.
Okay.
And Cypress has a mocking and stubbing library built into it. We call them spies. That you can pass in a spy to this function, and then we can query the spy later on, and be like, hey, were you actually called? And how many times were you called? What parameters were you called with? And so on and so on.
Got it.
And so we'll create inside of your button, on line 14 inside the JSX, we're going to pass in an onChange prop.
Okay. And I'm also getting some feedback here that I have broken my button by not passing in the text prop, which I haven't made optional. So we can deal with that in a moment. But so I've got my onChange prop, and is this a sci.spy?
There you go. And so you'll say sci.spy, and then at the end of it here, do a .as. And this, we're going to give it a name so we can reference it later. And so just say like onChange spy.
Okay. And then I'm just going to set this up to be, just give this some defaults so that we don't have to add that everywhere. Okay. And then I need an onChange, and my onChange is going to default to be nothing, and do an onChange. I'm going to let make that optional, and it's just a function. That's not right. What's the...
So React actually does provide the typings that we can use if you wanted to inherit them to kind of make our button function as an actual intrinsic HTML button element would.
Okay.
So
I just want that to do that so I can see what's going on. Okay. Here we go.
Let's see. So to do that, let's actually create an interface that the component that the props will inherit from. I think I'll make it a bit cleaner
Okay.
and call it like button props, or yeah, that's fine too. And then you want to, let me try if I remember the syntax. So we're going to extend on the button props.
Okay. Let me just do my little replacement here. I did this wrong because I forget how TypeScript works. There we go.
Yep.
We're going to extends,
and I think it's React dot button something button HTML attributes. There you go. And I think this one's a generic, and the generic is going to be a HTML button attribute, I believe.
button.
HTML button element. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Okay, and so now our button component is going to take in any attribute that you could pass into a normal button component as well. And now you don't need the onChange there because the onChange is provided by React.
Got it.
And okay, so you got it defaulting to a method, which is fine. Perfect.
Right? Or is it on click? On.
Yeah, on click. Sorry.
Should I change all these to on click?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And that wants to be very long. Good. Okay, that works.
All right.
So then if I come out here and I focus, triggers on click. Well, that's because we haven't actually written our test.
Yep. So we want to write an assertion to ask the spy if it actually got call clicked. And so to get to that spy, we aliased it to that on click spy name.
Oh yeah.
And so you'll use the get method again, and then you'll put an ampersand in front of this.
There it is.
I'm sorry. The @ symbol, whatever that one is called. And so the @ symbol is how you access aliases.
Okay.
Just like we did there. And then we want to say .should, and then the assertion here will be have been called.
Have been called. Okay, so let's go give it a check and run them again. Mm-hmm. And it works.
Yeah, and if you click on that, so this is our logger, and you can see like each step that the test took, and then on line number 4 there, you can, or line between 3 and 4, you can see that spy actually got called. That's letting you know that the spy called, and then the assertion happened correctly.
Got it. Okay, so now we've set this up to mount our component. So we're making sure that we've written a valid React component by mounting it. And then we make sure that our custom props are doing what they're supposed to do. If you pass in text, it has custom text. And then we're checking that our click handler, which is important for a button, does what we expect it to do when you click. So
exactly.
Great. I feel like those are good things.
Yeah, and I felt that's probably what we need for our login component right now. So we're good. The only other thing is so we made we're taking in all these attributes now that could be, but we're not spreading them across the button component. So let's go ahead and do that.
Taking in all these attributes.
An easy way to do that is if you take in another prop called props, and
so like
use this.
So like props here, or I guess just
so dot props, use the spread operator, and so anything that's not there is automatically going to be on this props, and then we can spread this across. There you go.
Got it.
That way, if they add like a disabled attribute or custom classes or styles or anything like that,
then it just works like a button. One of those things that you would have figured out as soon as you needed it, but good to catch early so that nobody has to let you know that, hey, you wrote a broken button. Okay, so
cool. We've
got ourselves a functional button. And now, does that mean that I could actually leave this out, this on click?
Yeah, because that will you still want the class name there, and I think
so. That's good, right?
Yep.
Yeah, simpler. And now we've got refactored code that continues to run. And we don't have to maintain that code anymore. Hooray! Okay, so I'm happy.
Sweet. All right. So I think we could probably go to the input field next.
Okay, so here's our input field, and that is going to be here's the HTML we got, and this input and this input are not the same, but they're close. So I'm going to start us by just setting this up. Okay, and then I gotta fix my classes. Okay, so I've fixed my classes. It doesn't like this for reasons I don't understand. Oh, we've got a doesn't like our ARIA stuff.
What did the error say again?
ARIA attributes must conform to valid values. So it needs to announce the message. And is that because of this? Like it needs a roll alert or something?
Maybe.
Definitely don't know enough. Oh, it's happy now.
Okay, sweet. Yeah, so this actually pulls up a...
Yeah, any accessibility experts watching, I don't actually know if that was correct what I just did or if I just convinced it to stop talking. So please speak up if you know.
And so that actually brings up a good segue about accessibility and how when you're writing component tests, how this can help you with your accessibility of your components. And I am by no means like an accessibility expert, but there's some tools that we can use to actually not only test our code, but we can actually test accessibility as well.
Nice,
If you want to,
excellent.
if you want to take a segue into that, we can explore that.
Okay, I'm gonna just put up a little bit of a time here. We're at about 25-ish minutes.
Okay.
So depending on how long that segue is, because it's super important. We can either finish the form and then come back around and add that, or
Okay.
if you want to add it now, we can.
Yeah, let's finish the form first.
Okay.
Just because there's a couple of other concepts to get through that I think are important. Okay, so you got over here, you got your input label.
So
looks like we probably need to add some props for to customize some things here.
Okay, so I'm going to close this test. I'm going to say we need to be able to pull in. Let's define this as an interface input props, and that's going to extend input HTML attributes.
And this will be HTML something.
Oh,
HTML input probably.
Input
element. Yeah, there you go. Cool.
Okay. So what we'll need is we need a label that's going to be a string. We need that'll go here, and then we need. Let's see, the type is going to be included. Class name.
Maybe
will ARIA come in with the attributes?
It would, but I think these are we're going to play around with these ARIA attributes later via code.
Okay, so we're going to have the error message. We also need an ID because we're missing some way to identify this as anything.
So ID will come over as part of the HTML attributes if we
so
need
we don't
it.
need that.
Yeah, the only thing we probably want to do, so we got hard-coded password in a couple of places. And so we can, if we get a hold of the props, we can use props.name.
Props.name. Got it. Okay. So let's just pull these in here. I'm going to get the label out, and then we need the error message, and we need the props. Okay, so then I'm going to spread our props, and we will use one of these and one of these, and you said props.name. Okay, I like that. Take that same little bit of code, to replace this one here. And class name error, role alert. Good. We need the label and we need the error message. Okay, so that's the component itself. And we need to make sure that we set an ID and everything on it. So let's describe our input. That's going to take a function. And we'll say it mounts. And say sci.mount input comes in from input. And that's going to need, because you shouldn't have an input that doesn't have a label, we'll have a label of test and an error message of busted. Okay, so that should be like our baseline here. And if I open this up, did it already do it for us? Let me go back, input, and there's our hello world working. So we need some styles. So we have those here. So I'm going to grab them out. And we'll make a input.module.css. In that goes. And let's see, everything has pretty clear class names. So I'm going to come back in here and import styles from input.module.css. And we'll do a styles.label. We'll do a styles.input. And we will do styles.error. And theoretically speaking, it all does what we want.
Yeah, looks pretty good.
All right, happy with that. It's got our our fonts loaded and everything because we already set up those global styles. So we're in pretty solid shape here.
Yeah, I think visual wise, it's looking where it is now. So let's work on some functionality for it. So I think probably a good first test is to make sure that error message only shows up when appropriate. And so our criteria for that is going to be, we don't want to yell at the user as soon as they come and be like, hey, if it's blank, please enter it. So we're going to wait until like the form is submitted before we start yelling at the user.
Okay.
And
so we
do that,
start by mounting.
Yep.
And we'll give it a label of test and an error message of error, just to minimize screen real estate here. Okay.
Cool. And then we can, let's add another prop called submitted that the parent form will pass in to let it know if the form has been submitted yet or not.
Okay, this could be a Boolean. Boolean. Get submitted.
So we're using a combination of these ARIA attributes and CSS to display the error message when the field's actually invalid. And so that ARIA-invalid, we can actually, instead of hard coding true, we can set this up to say if it's submitted and there's no value, show the error message. So this would be a props.value.
Props.value. Okay.
And so
what don't you like?
We can say only shows error messages when actually invalid. And so in your test, we can do a selector. So
should I? Oh, you want to take these like at one piece at a time here? Also, I think to make TypeScript happy, I need to do like a is invalid equals nope here. And then now are you happy? There you go. Yeah, it wants that to be must conform to invalid attribute value expression. But why? Because that is...
It's a Boolean, right?
Oh, it needs to be a string. That's what it is. So if I'm... Does that do it? No, it doesn't like that either. Do we need to do one of these? Still doesn't like it. I don't know how to deal with that, so I'm going to ignore it.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to stop Vite from compiling.
I'll just go over here.
I think that must be an ARIA plugin or something that you have, because I don't think I've ever seen those messages.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. Yeah, where does that come from? It comes from
Axe
ARIA
or WebHint.
Yeah. Okay. So that's something I'll have to dig into, figure out why that's doing what it's doing, because this does seem valid.
Okay, so on the right-hand side, I think it wants a submitted value now.
It wants a submitted value. So we'll do submitted equals...
So here...
false, right? And then...
Well, let's look at your test message again. So it should show error messages when actually invalid. And so that would mean we have submitted and the value is blank.
Okay.
Cool. And now show you a little bit different way to write a selector here. And so we've seen how we can select things by, stuff that's inside of the HTML. Mm-hmm. We can also select items based on their text values. Okay. And so we can write a selector here. Instead of using get, we'll use contains. And then you can just pass in whatever the error message is going to be. And I think you said it that is it? Okay, yeah, just error. There you go.
Yeah, maybe we can, for the sake of making this slightly less ambiguous, we'll make it an actual error message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you wanted to get more granular into it and say hey, I want to make sure a span or a particular div tag has this message, then you can dive deep into the selectors for that. But for our component here, that's probably good.
Okay. So we can does not show error messages when empty. And so on this one, we'll do a submitted false, but the value is going to be empty. And is it just a not?
No, we need to dive on the right-hand side a little bit and do a should at the end. And so we can say dot should not be visible.
Okay. Let's see. Expected it not to be visible. Should it not exist? Because this is gonna come back empty, right? Because there won't be anything on screen.
Let's add, so in the contains, let's get a little bit more specific about our selector. So the first parameter in contains, let's pass in a string of span, because that's what the error message is in. Let's just see if that fixes it.
Like that?
Yeah. There we go.
Now it's happy.
Okay. A little confused why it didn't work first, but I'm not going to dwell on it.
All right. So we have, it mounts properly. It shows an error message when it's invalid. It does not show an error message when it's just empty. Mm-hmm. And theoretically, we want to also check no error when valid. And so if I set a value of then it should also just not fail. No error when valid. There we go. So great. And this, what's good about this is the more I'm doing this, the more I'm just kind of thinking of edge cases. And as a developer, we're not going to catch all of these now. There are going to be a lot of things that somebody tries to do that cause an error. But now I can just come in and say like, oh, this, need to make that into a sentence, does not error when valid. And this is like, okay, great. I need another use case. I'm going to just throw this in, cover the edge case. And now I'm sure that we'll catch that next time. And that is, that's great. And the fact that I'm getting this feedback so dang quickly is wonderful, because I know immediately that a thing is or is not working. And that's pretty excellent.
Sweet. Okay, so we probably could write a few more tests for this input field, but it's a little bit just more of the same.
Sure. Yeah, let's get to the integrated, like let's build ourselves a login form here.
There we go.
All right, so I'm going to do the setup here of login form.sci.tsx. I'm also going to set up our CSS module, so login form.module.css. Let's grab that CSS out. And I'm just going to close this because we don't need it anymore. And then I'm going to come into my login form. Oh, already opened that one. Wow, this one. So I'm going to import my styles from login form.module.css. And then I'm going to export function login form. And that's going to return one of these, but we're going to build it out of our components. So let's start by doing, let's see, the legend can stay. This is going to be an input, and it's going to have a label of login, and it's going to have a type of text. Oh, we probably need to drop that part out, don't we? And then it's going to have a class name of input. And
I think the class names were already in the component.
Oh, that's right. You're right. So we need a name of login so that it catches. Nope, it's username. That's what it is. And then we need an ID of, or do we need an ID on this?
No.
The name will catch it. And then we have the error message that we need. Login is required. Yeah, login is required. All right. So then if I close this up, is it happy? If I
probably want submitted as well.
That's right. Submitted.
And we don't have.
So I'm just going to
add a piece of.
Yeah, we'll fix that in a second. I'm going to start here. So that one's good. And then we need one more. And this one is going to be password. It's going to be a type of password. We're going to give it a name of password. And we're going to give it an error message of password is required. Okay. So then I can drop this out. And then our button is going to have text of login. And it'll probably need more stuff, but we can stop it there for now. We need these messages. Whoops, back off. There we go. Okay. And need to fix a few more classes. What else you got? That's it, right?
Yeah, looks good to me.
Okay, so let's go in here and we're going to describe login form. We're going to it mounts. And this is going to be a sci.mount of our login form, which comes in, and we don't have any props there set yet. I need to set up our styles. That was the other piece that we needed. So styles.form, styles dot field set. I'm going to copy paste this so I can go faster. We need a legend. we need, let's see, no classes, no classes. Here's our error. And here is our success. All right, so this should work once I save it. I come out here, I'm gonna focus, I'm gonna bounce back, go to my login form, and look at it go. In one try, we got the fully designed login form with the components in place, and this is all functional. Like that's honestly, that's pretty excellent. That you know, we did our tests on these components themselves, so when we actually went to use them, it did exactly what we wanted because we put the time in to make those components pass our tests.
Absolutely. How much time have we got?
We have about 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes. Okay. So there's the login form itself probably holds most of our actual logic, especially around like making the fields like be required or whatnot. But in the interest of time, let's just work on submitting the form
Okay.
to actually, test validation and stuff like that. And so what we'll want to do here is let's try to test and then kind of like watch it fail.
Okay.
But we'll want to like say like, hey, if I pass in invalid credentials, I want to see a bad username or password message, something like that. And here, our backend team is still working on our auth endpoint, but we know what the auth endpoint is going to look like. And so this is a kind of advantage that we get when we're using a testing tool is we can actually start working and just mock the API requests and work with it. And then as soon as like they're in, when we drop the form into the actual application, it should work as long as the contracts are all correct.
Okay.
So we want to put in type in a username and password. And so we're going to write some selectors to get those inputs.
And I guess we can just do. Right?
Yep, that should work.
That's one way to do it. And then we want to.
And so we got a type method. And this will say, and so put like bad user, something like that. Hacker.
Okay. So we've got ourselves a hacker, and then we'll duplicate this and get the password. And so everyone knows the most secure password is Hunter2. And then what?
Now we wanted to click the login button.
Okay, so we want to scigget button. Click, right?
Yep. Okay, and now this, we need to go through and we want to verify that like a welcome message is displayed now that will say welcome, or no, this is the negative case. We want to say like bad username or password.
Okay, so bad username, username or password should be visible. Okay, so that, make that a little bit wider so we can see what's going on. So we're going to type, we're going to click the submit button, we're going to check that we got a bad username or password, and this one might actually, no, it's mad. Targeted a disabled element. Interesting.
Oh, because the submitted is hard-coded to false, and so it's disabling the element.
How?
I think. Oh wait, no, you defaulted to false. Why is that disabled?
Huh? Well, yeah. Why would that be disabled?
Submitted false. Oh, we need to keep track of the value. Well, I don't know why that would be. Well, one thing we do need to do is keep track of the values through a couple of state variables.
Okay, so we'll do username, set username, and that's going to be use state, and we'll start it as empty. Duplicate that. Do password. Set password. And then down here, we will set the value to username, and we'll set the value to password. And on change, right?
Right.
I want to set, no, I need the event, right? Is this right? And then I want to set password to event.target.value.
Yep.
Okay, let me copy paste that, do it again up here. And we're going to set the username this time. All right, so now we have controlled elements. And presumably, what is it?
Why is it? Oh, did it stop? Okay, so one thing that it's doing is right now we're not overriding the form submit, and so it's submitting
okay.
back to the server and refreshing itself. So yeah, we could write a submit handler and then prevent default on it.
Okay, so
not all over here, but in the code, yeah.
Okay, so we want to function on submit will be an event, and we're going to event.prevent default, and that should get us started in that. Oh crap, what is this? It's like React dot synthetic event, and then that needs to be like an HTML event.
You can use react.form event, I think aliases to what you're typing out here.
Here?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so much easier than what I've been doing. Okay, and so then we do an on submit is on submit.
There we go. Now let's
try
see
that one more time.
Disabled. There we go.
So we were just submitting the whole form, and that was causing chaos.
Yeah, I was actually causing a post back to our server.
Right.
And
okay.
then I was reloading and running the test again.
Gotcha. Okay.
Cool.
So now it is actually doing what we want, but it's not doing what we want because we don't have any logic here to control these. So
yeah, so we could. I just sent you a little bit of snippet of the in our chat of the fetch request that we'll be making to the server.
Okay, and do I do that in this one or this one?
In the component itself.
Okay. Okay, so our login, I need to get an error message. Okay, so we're going to get one of those. And this runs. Okay, JSON stringify username password. That is going to be called here, right?
Yep. And then down below where the error message is displayed, we can make that only display when error message has a value.
Okay, and we'll drop the actual error message in there. Okay.
And we probably want to set error message to a blank screen every time we submit the form.
Okay, so on submit, does this need to, so if username and password, await fetch, if the res status is for one, otherwise set error message to just explicitly undefined.
Blank string will work because that will be falsy in your test down below.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah. Okay. All right. Bad username and password. Expect it to be visible. Okay. So yeah, that is now failing because it's not checking the thing, but we need to mock this now.
Yep. So if you go back into the test runner real quick.
Into the test runner.
You can probably see down. Okay, yeah, between line 7 and 8, it's trying to make a uh, fetch request to the auth endpoint is coming back with a 404 because it doesn't exist on our dead server. So we can use the sci.intercept method to intercept this API request.
Okay.
And we could either spy on it or we can give it a value to return back. And so that's what we'll do. In our code, you can see like, hey, if it's a status code of 401, that means we have a bad authentication.
Okay. So I'm going to just mimic a response here. And the response I'm going to send is status
code 401. Yep. The only thing you're missing is online. The first parameter is the HTTP method that we're going to take. And so this is going to be a post request. There you go. And
method URL response. Okay, I see. Yep. Okay. So that should do it, right?
I think so. Let's give it a shot.
Let's just reload. Still got a 404, which means I did something wrong. So let's look again. Sci.intercept. Do I need to run this ahead of anything? Ahead of mounting?
Sci.intercept post. Let me just look at all your syntax here. Post auth, status code. Oh, you don't need to return. This is just the third parameter is not a function. It's the object that you actually want to return. So you can.
Oh. I just made this too complicated. Okay. So then let's try again.
I'm actually a little surprised the function didn't work. It probably should work.
There it goes.
Yep, there we go. Sweet. And then we could do the same thing for the happy path here, but it's kind of a repeat of the process. But
yeah, that'd be copy paste.
Yep.
All right.
Sweet.
So that puts us actually at time. So this is cool stuff, and like it's really, you can see how quickly this starts to build really resilient code. So I can definitely see a lot of value in this, and that instant feedback, as opposed to having to stop coding, run the tests, then respond. It just being able to see it. If I was using two monitors here, I would have it just running off to the side, but since we only have one streaming, I have them stacked. But I would run them side by side so that I can kind of see what's happening and have my extra input as I go, just to make sure that I'm building resilient code. And I think that is very, very cool. So we're going to call this one a win, and I'm going to take us over to, let's see, we've got your Twitter, which everybody should definitely be going to follow. We've got the Cypress homepage. You should go check that out. Where else should somebody go if they want more information?
So Cypress in our docs is the best place to go to get started, to learn about Cypress in general, but as well as component testing. So we got that component testing section down there, and there's some getting started guides and whatnot. And then kind of another resource that we have up there in the menu is you'll see the learn, and this will bring you to our learn.cypress.io, where this goes more in depth into kind of testing practices in general, best practices to go through, what you should think about as you're writing your tests and whatnot. So it's just a little bit more completely free, but it's more premium educational content, not just kind of dry documentation content.
Gotcha. Cool. And I'm going to do one more shout out to our captioner. We've had Diane with us today. Thank you so much for being here. That's from White Coat Captioning, and that's made possible through the support of our sponsors, Netlify, NX, New Relic, and Pluralsight, all kicking in to make this show more accessible to more people. And don't forget to go check out the schedule. We've got a lot of good stuff coming up. It's more than I have time to talk about, but you can add it on Google Calendar. You can follow on Twitch here, which will let you know when I go live. You can subscribe on YouTube so that you see new episodes. All of those things help get this show out to more people, which I very much appreciate. Eli, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. This was a ton of fun.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for having me. Excited to be on the show.
Yeah. All right, y'all. We're going to go find somebody to raid, and we will see you next time.